What would you do if a deadly predator attacked? From a Navy crew stalked by a great white to a snorkeler's narrow escape, these 6 jaw-dropping shark encounters expose the ocean's unpredictable dangers. With stories of survival, tragedy, and heart-pounding moments, stay with us to the end. You won't believe what happens next. It was a bright and calm morning on July 15, 2022, off the coast of California. The sea was quiet, with only gentle waves lapping at the vessel's sides. A small U.S. Navy crew was conducting a routine training exercise miles from the shore near the Channel Islands. The crew aboard the small naval boat had been practicing maneuvers and drills, preparing for the unexpected, as is standard for Navy personnel. The crew consisted of 6 sailors: Lieutenant William Bill Martin, 38, the seasoned leader of the team; Chief Petty Officer Sarah Jenkins, 28, a highly skilled navigator and second-in-command; Petty Officer First Class Daniel Thompson, 30, a communications expert; Petty Officer Second Class Mark Lewis, 26, a mechanic responsible for the boat's engine and operations; Seaman Michael Rodriguez, 23, a young recruit and the newest member of the team; and Seaman Apprentice Henry Walker, 20, another recruit, eager to prove himself. Lieutenant Martin had served in the Navy for over 15 years and was known for his calm demeanor under pressure. Chief Petty Officer Jenkins, though younger, was highly respected for her quick thinking and excellent sense of direction. Petty Officer Thompson had an uncanny ability to make communication systems work, no matter how challenging the environment. With his mechanical skills, Mark Lewis was always the go-to guy for repairs, while Rodriguez and Walker, the 2 youngest on board, were still learning the ropes but showed great promise. The day began like any other. The boat moved smoothly through the water as the crew conducted routine drills, exchanging information and working through their tasks. The sun hung high and no cloud was in sight. The crew didn't expect anything unusual. They focused on finishing their exercises and returning to the base. But as the hours passed, the calm sea seemed to shift, almost as if something was lurking beneath. It started as a faint ripple in the water. At first, the crew thought it was just a fish or perhaps a large school of marine life moving beneath the surface. But then, they saw it. A dark shape moved toward the boat, gliding silently through the water almost unnervingly fast. At first, no one thought much of it, assuming it was just a curious predator, perhaps a dolphin or a seal, both of which were common in these waters. But as the shape approached, the crew realized something was wrong. The creature was large, much larger than a seal. It circled the boat once, twice, and then again, coming closer with each pass. Lieutenant Martin squinted through his binoculars and immediately knew it was a great white shark. A massive one, far bigger than any they had seen in their training exercises. The shark's movements were precise, almost deliberate, and the crew began to feel unease. This wasn't the behavior of a curious animal. This was the behavior of a predator. The shark kept circling, growing bolder with each pass, its sharp eyes fixed on the crew. Chief Petty Officer Jenkins ordered everyone to stay alert, but the tension in the air was palpable. The crew members looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Then, without warning, the shark rammed the boat's hull. The impact sent a shudder through the vessel, and for a moment the crew was thrown off balance. Mark Lewis stumbled, nearly losing his footing as the impact echoed through the boat. The fully aggressive shark hit the ship again, this time harder, causing it to rock violently. The crew scrambled to respond, each member shouting instructions and trying to steady themselves as the situation spiraled out of control. In the chaos, Seaman Michael Rodriguez, standing near the boat's edge, lost his balance. His foot slipped, and before anyone could react, he tumbled overboard. The crew's hearts raced as they watched Michael fall into the water below. The shark, sensing the opportunity, immediately lunged at him. Its massive jaws clamped down on Michael's leg, dragging him beneath the surface before anyone could reach him. Panic set in. Chief Petty Officer Jenkins screamed for the crew to act. Mark and Bill grabbed emergency ropes and threw them into the water, hoping to pull Michael back up. With the boat rocking and the shark still circling nearby, the crew fought against the panic and worked together to pull Michael back aboard. The struggle was intense, but they managed to get him back onto the boat, though it was clear that he had been severely injured. His leg was mangled, blood staining the water around him. The crew did their best to stop the bleeding, using whatever equipment they had on hand. Michael was still conscious, but his face was pale and he was shaking from the shock. Having had its fill of the attack, the shark seemed to disappear into the deep waters, leaving the boat severely damaged and the crew shaken. The incident left them with more questions than answers, and the chilling reality of the situation was far from over. The attack had only begun, but the immediate danger had passed. The crew had survived the initial shock, but the consequences of the attack would linger in their minds long after they returned to base. After the shark attack, the crew worked together quickly to tend to Seaman Michael Rodriguez's injuries. The boat rocked violently, still shaken by the shark's attack. Mark Lewis did his best to stop the bleeding with his steady hands using the emergency first aid kit. But the situation was grave. Michael's leg was severely damaged, and the blood kept flowing, staining the deck around him. Lieutenant Martin took command, directing the crew to focus on getting back to the shore. The boat was damaged, and it was clear that they couldn't stay out at sea much longer. Chief Petty Officer Jenkins quickly sent out distress signals with the communication equipment. She knew they needed help, and they needed it fast. As the boat began its slow journey back toward the mainland, the crew stayed focused, with each sailor doing their best to keep the situation under control. Despite their best efforts, the mood aboard the vessel was tense. The shark was still out there, and no one knew if it would return. The attack had been so sudden and aggressive that the crew couldn't shake the fear that more danger awaited them. As the boat neared the shore, Michael's condition worsened. He grew weaker, and the crew could see the pain written on his face. Lieutenant Martin ordered the boat to dock as quickly as possible. They needed medical attention for Michael, and they needed it urgently. The crew was physically and emotionally exhausted, but knew they had to keep pushing forward. When they finally reached the shore, an emergency team awaited them. Michael was rushed to a nearby hospital, where he received immediate treatment for his injuries. He had survived the shark's attack, but it was uncertain how long it would take him to recover fully. His leg was badly injured, but the doctors were hopeful that, with time, he would heal. The aftermath of the attack left the crew shaken, but they were grateful for the fact that no one had lost their life that day. The Navy immediately began reviewing their safety procedures and operations in shark-prone waters. The incident served as a harsh reminder of how unpredictable nature can be, and how quickly a training exercise could turn into a fight for survival. The attack on July 15, 2022, would remain a haunting memory for the crew. Though they had survived, the emotional toll of that day would stay with them for a long time. The shark had reminded them of the ocean's raw power, and the crew's bond was stronger than ever before. It was a bright and sunny morning on August 23, 2021, in Southern California. The waves were perfect, and the beach was filled with surfers, all waiting for the ideal moment to ride the waves. Among them was Ryan Cole, a 28-year-old seasoned surfer. He was well known in the local surfing community for his skill and passion. Ryan had been surfing since he was a young boy, spending countless hours on the water, perfecting his technique and learning the ocean's rhythms. Over the years, he became one of the most respected surfers in the area. Ryan had a deep connection to the ocean. Surfing was more than just a hobby for him, it was his life. He had competed in several local competitions, and while he hadn't won them all, his dedication to the sport was unmatched. His friends and fellow surfers admired his relentless drive and calmness in facing challenges. For Ryan, the ocean was a place of peace and excitement, and he loved every moment he spent in the waves. That morning, Ryan had set out early. The sun was still low in the sky, and the water was calm, perfect for a session. He paddled out on his board, feeling the familiar pull of the waves beneath him. The water was cool, and the waves crashing against the shore filled his ears. It was just another typical day in his surfing routine. As Ryan paddled further out, he noticed the waves were growing larger. He readied himself for the next big one. But as he continued to swim, something unusual happened. A shadow appeared beneath his board. At first, Ryan didn't think much of it, assuming it was a school of fish or a seal. But as the shadow grew larger, he began to feel uneasy. He paused for a moment, looking around him. Suddenly, without warning, the water beneath Ryan seemed to explode. A massive great white shark lunged from the depths, startling him. It brushed against the board, sending a wave of panic through Ryan's body. Before he could react, the shark struck. It clamped down on Ryan's leg with terrifying force. Ryan screamed in pain as he tried to kick and slap at the shark, hoping to break free. But the shark's grip was unyielding. Its powerful jaws tightened around his leg, dragging him into the water. Ryan fought fiercely, his body thrashing in an attempt to escape. He could feel the immense force of the shark pulling him deeper, and every effort to break free only seemed to make the grip stronger. His heart raced as he struggled for air, but the shark's power was overwhelming. Ryan's body was being pulled farther underwater, and his vision began to blur as he gasped for breath. In those terrifying moments, Ryan knew he had to fight with everything he had. But the water was too deep, and the shark was too strong. His legs and arms grew weaker, and the pain in his leg was unbearable. The attack had happened so quickly, and despite his desperate efforts, Ryan couldn't escape. As the lifeguard noticed what was happening and rushed toward him, it was too late. Ryan Cole succumbed to his injuries, leaving behind a community shaken by the tragic loss of a passionate surfer. The aftermath of Ryan Cole's tragic attack left the community in shock. His friends and fellow surfers struggled to understand what had happened. Ryan had been more than just a surfer to them. He had been a mentor and a friend. His passion for surfing had inspired many, and his loss was felt deeply across Southern California. The news of the shark attack spread quickly, and many people who knew Ryan were left grieving the loss of someone who had lived his life with so much energy and enthusiasm. The days following the incident, the local surfing community came together to honor Ryan's memory. Surfers gathered on the same beaches where Ryan had spent countless hours, many of whom held memorials in his honor. The ocean that had taken him was now a symbol of his love for surfing, and they found comfort in knowing that Ryan had been doing what he loved in his final moments. The lifeguards who had rushed to Ryan's aid did everything they could, but it was too late when they reached him. The force of the shark's attack had been too strong, and Ryan's injuries were too severe. Despite the lifeguards' best efforts, Ryan could not be saved. He succumbed to his injuries, and the beach, which had been filled with surfers enjoying their day, was now a place of mourning. Ryan's family, too, was left to cope with the loss. His parents, his siblings, and those closest to him had to navigate the pain of his sudden death. It was especially hard for them to understand how something as beautiful as the ocean, which had given Ryan so much joy, could take him away so quickly. The local authorities launched a review of safety measures in the area, especially in waters known for shark activity. While such attacks were rare, they were a stark reminder of the dangers beneath the ocean's calm surface. They prompted the community to consider how to protect those who surf and swim in these waters without losing sight of the beauty and freedom the ocean provides. The memory of Ryan Cole, a passionate surfer, would forever be linked to the waves he loved so much. Though his life was tragically cut short, his impact on the people around him would never be forgotten. On February 12, 2022, in the early morning hours, 43-year-old Rachel Smith headed to a remote beach on the east coast of Australia for her usual morning swim. Rachel had always been drawn to the sea. Growing up in the coastal town of Byron Bay, she had spent most of her life near the water. The ocean was her place of peace, where she could escape the demands of everyday life. As an experienced swimmer, Rachel had swum in many different locations and felt confident in her ability to handle herself in the water. Rachel was known for her quiet, independent nature. She enjoyed the solitude of early morning swims when the beach was empty and the world felt calm. On that particular morning, the air was cool and the sun had not yet risen. The ocean stretched out before her, tranquil and inviting. Rachel walked along the shore, dipping her toes in the water before she swam out further, as she usually did. She enjoyed the stillness and how the ocean embraced her as she swam through it. She swam for a while, moving further from the shore. The water was clear and the sea was quiet, with only the gentle swish of waves to break the silence. Rachel was lost in the rhythm of her strokes, enjoying the peace of the ocean. But as she swam farther out, she failed to notice something moving beneath the surface. Just then, out of nowhere, a bull shark emerged from the depths. It was a large and powerful creature lurking silently in the water, striking with terrifying speed. The shark clamped down on Rachel's ankle, its sharp teeth sinking deep into her flesh. Rachel screamed in pain, her heart racing as the shock of the attack set in. The water around her turned red, and she struggled to free herself. She kicked and punched at the shark with all her strength, desperately trying to escape its grip. But the shark was relentless. It pulled her deeper into the water, dragging her further from the shore. Rachel fought with everything she had, her panic rising as the shark continued to drag her down. Despite her best efforts, the shark's grip only tightened, and the pain in her leg was unbearable. She felt herself being pulled further into the water, her breath growing shorter as the struggle intensified. Nearby, a group of fishermen on a boat heard Rachel's screams. They rushed toward the sounds of her distress, desperately trying to reach her before it was too late. As they neared her, they could see the shark still holding on to Rachel. But they managed to pull her from the water with great effort. The fishermen brought her onto the boat, but Rachel's injuries were severe. Her leg was badly torn, and the blood loss was overwhelming. Despite their best attempts to stop the bleeding and help her, Rachel's condition was critical. Rachel was still alive when she was pulled onto the boat, but the damage had been done. The loss of blood was too great. Rachel Smith succumbed to her injuries, leaving behind a community devastated by the tragic loss of a woman who had loved the ocean all her life. Her death sent shockwaves through the local community, and it became a sad reminder of the unpredictable dangers of swimming in shark-infested waters. The incident sparked calls for stronger safety measures to protect swimmers from such attacks in the future. The tragic death of Rachel Smith left the community in deep mourning. Her loss was felt not only by her family but by everyone who had known her. Rachel had been a beloved figure in the local town. People remembered her as someone who always had a kind word for others and had a strong connection to the ocean. Her passion for swimming and her quiet spirit had inspired many, and now her sudden and tragic death was hard to comprehend. The local community quickly came together to honor Rachel's memory. Friends and neighbors held a memorial service on the beach where Rachel had spent so much of her time. The place that had once brought her peace was now a site of grief. The event deeply affected the fishermen who had rushed to her aid. They had tried their best to save her, but it had been too late. They shared their stories of how they had heard her screams and acted quickly, but despite their efforts, Rachel had not survived. In the days that followed, news of the shark attack spread, and many people in the area were shaken by the unpredictable nature of the attack. Shark attacks were rare, but this one had struck so suddenly and violently that it left people questioning the safety of the waters. Authorities began investigating the incident, and there were calls from the public for stronger safety measures in shark-prone areas. Many wondered if more could have been done to prevent such an attack, and whether warnings about shark activity should have been more clearly posted at remote beaches. Still in shock from the loss, Rachel's family was left to cope with the aftermath. They had known that Rachel loved the ocean, but they had never imagined that her passion for swimming would end tragically. The pain of losing her was almost unbearable. Yet through their grief, they found comfort in knowing that Rachel had been doing something she loved in her final moments. She had always found peace in the water. That was how they would choose to remember her. On April 18, 2023, David Morales, a 54-year-old veteran fisherman, was out in the Gulf of Mexico preparing for another day on the water. David had spent over 30 years fishing in these waters and was known in his small coastal town for his knowledge of the sea. As a seasoned fisherman, he had seen almost everything the ocean could throw at him. He had worked on boats since he was young, learning the trade from his father and later teaching the next generation of fishermen. His hands were rough from years of hard work, and his face was weathered from the sun, but his heart belonged to the ocean. David had a small, sturdy boat for his fishing expeditions. The boat was simple but reliable, perfect for the kind of fishing he did. He had prepared it early that morning, as he always did, checking the gear and ensuring everything was in place before setting out to fish. The Gulf of Mexico was known for its vast waters and abundant marine life, and David knew exactly where to go for the best catch. The water was calm that morning and the sky was clear, making it perfect for fishing. David paddled out, enjoying the peace and solitude of the open water. He was focused on his task as he began preparing his netting, unaware that something dangerous was lurking beneath the surface. The sea had always been David's ally, but it would become a place of terror that day. As David leaned over the side of his boat to adjust his gear, he noticed a shadow moving beneath the water. At first, he thought it was just a school of fish swimming past, something he had seen countless times before. He didn't know much of it and continued with his task. But then the shadow grew larger, and before David could react, a massive tiger shark lunged from the depths. The shark struck quickly, its teeth sinking deep into David's thigh. The sudden pain was overwhelming. David was shocked and disoriented. The shark's powerful bite caused him to lose his balance, and he tumbled into the water. The cold salt water hit his face as he struggled to stay afloat. He could feel the shark thrashing beneath him, pulling him into the depths. David fought desperately, kicking and flailing. But the shark was too strong. It pulled him under the surface, the force of the attack nearly dragging him completely out of control. David's leg was still trapped in the shark's jaws. The pain was unbearable, and he could feel the blood rushing from the wound. The shark thrashed violently, tearing at his leg with its sharp teeth. David tried to break free, but the shark's grip only tightened. He could feel the water growing warmer as his blood mixed with the ocean around him. The shark tore off a chunk of his leg, and David's strength was slowly fading. David knew he had to survive. He fought for hours, desperately trying to stay alive. His energy was draining, and his chances of escape grew slimmer by the minute. The sea, once his ally, now felt like his enemy. The hours stretched, and David's hope faded as he struggled to stay conscious. As David continued to fight the shark's grip, his body grew weaker and weaker. The pain from the attack was immense, and blood flowed freely from his torn leg. Every second felt like an eternity. His strength was fading fast, and just as he began to lose hope, he saw the small fishing boat racing toward him. Having heard his desperate screams, the fishermen spotted him in the water and rushed to help. With great effort, they pulled David aboard the boat. His body was limp, and he was barely conscious. His leg was badly torn and the blood loss was severe, but the fishermen knew they had to act fast. The boat rocked as they sped toward the shore, praying they could reach help in time. David's breathing was shallow and his eyes fluttered as he tried to stay awake. The pain was overwhelming and his thoughts were clouded. The fishermen radioed ahead, informing the authorities of the shark attack and requesting immediate medical assistance. As they reached the shore, emergency responders were waiting for them. They quickly carried David to an ambulance where he was rushed to the nearest hospital. Despite the blood loss and trauma, he was still alive, but his situation was critical. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly to stabilize him. They knew his leg had been badly damaged and that it was impossible to save it. After carefully assessing his condition, the medical team made the difficult decision to amputate his leg above the knee to stop the spread of infection and save his life. The procedure was successful in that it stopped the bleeding and helped David survive, but the loss of his leg was a devastating blow. David remained unconscious for several hours as his body began to recover from the shock. When he finally awoke, he was in pain but still alive. His recovery was uncertain, and the emotional toll of the attack weighed heavily on him. David's survival was a miracle, but the attack left deep physical and emotional scars. The community rallied around him, supporting him through his long road to recovery. Though his life had been saved, David now had to adjust to a new reality without the leg he had relied on for so many years. His strength and resilience would be tested in the coming months as he faced a future forever changed by the shark attack. On August 5, 2023, 29-year-old Jonathan Clark set out for a day of snorkeling near a remote island off the coast of Florida. Jonathan had always been fascinated by marine life and spent many years exploring the waters around various coastal areas. As a young man, he had taken up snorkeling and diving, captivated by the beauty and peacefulness of the ocean. His friends and family knew him as a nature lover, always eager to explore the wonders beneath the sea's surface. He had made countless memories during his time in the water, and that day, he hoped to add another to his collection. The island where Jonathan was snorkeling was known for its clear waters and vibrant marine life. As he glided through the water, Jonathan marveled at the schools of colorful fish that darted around him and the coral formations on the ocean floor. It was a perfect day for snorkeling. Calm waters, a warm breeze, and the sun shining brightly overhead. Jonathan felt at peace as he swam further from the shore, enjoying the tranquility of the ocean. As he ventured farther, Jonathan noticed something moving beneath him. At first, it seemed like just another fish or perhaps a shadow of a larger creature. But as he looked closer, he saw the unmistakable shape of a bull shark circling below him. The shark at first kept its distance, gliding silently through the water. Jonathan, who had experience with marine life, knew that sharks were a common sight in these waters. He wasn't overly worried, thinking the shark would simply move along, as they often did. But then, without warning, the shark turned sharply and lunged toward Jonathan. It struck with incredible speed, biting down on Jonathan's calf with immense force. The pain was immediate and intense. Jonathan gasped as he felt the shark's sharp teeth sinking into his leg. He tried to pull his leg away in shock, but the shark's grip was strong. His mind raced as he realized the severity of the situation. He kicked and thrashed with all his strength, hoping to break free from the shark's hold. But the shark wasn't letting go. Jonathan's heart raced as the shark pulled him deeper into the water. The water around him began to cloud with blood as the shark's relentless bite tore his calf. In agony, Jonathan fought back, pushing against the shark's powerful jaws. He struggled to keep his head above the water, gasping for air. Every second felt like an eternity. The shark dragged him further, its jaws tightly clamped onto his leg. Jonathan's mind was clear, but the pain and the pressure were overwhelming. Thinking quickly, Jonathan spotted a nearby coral structure just below the surface. He pushed himself toward it with all his strength, grabbing the coral. The rough edges dug into his hands, but he didn't care. He used the coral to push himself back toward the surface. The shark circled beneath him, waiting for another chance to strike. But Jonathan fought to stay above the water. Every moment felt like a battle, but Jonathan's quick thinking had given him the opportunity he needed. Jonathan's body felt heavy as he struggled to stay afloat. His leg was burning with pain and his breath was shallow as he fought to maintain his balance in the water. He had pushed away from the coral and slowly returned toward the surface. Every movement was a struggle, and the shark was still circling below, waiting for another chance to attack. Jonathan's mind raced with fear and urgency, but he focused on reaching safety. A nearby boat appeared just as he began to feel the first signs of hope. It was a small fishing boat with several local fishermen who had seen the commotion in the water. The fishermen quickly maneuvered the ship toward Jonathan, their eyes wide with alarm as they realized the gravity of the situation. Jonathan was bloodied and shaken, barely able to keep his head above the water. His calf was badly torn, and blood stained the water around him, but the fishermen didn't waste a moment. They reached out and pulled Jonathan aboard as quickly as possible, careful not to further aggravate his injuries. Once on board, the fishermen worked quickly to keep Jonathan calm and stable. They had already called for medical help, and the boat raced toward the shore. Jonathan's body was shaking from shock and his thoughts were unclear, but he could still feel the deep, agonizing pain in his leg. His vision was blurry, but he was aware of the fishermen's efforts to help him. As the boat moved closer to the shore, Jonathan fought to stay awake, but the blood loss and shock were taking their toll. When they reached the shore, emergency responders were already waiting. The medical team quickly rushed to Jonathan's side, assessing the severity of his injuries. They could see that the shark's bite had badly wounded his leg. The blood loss was significant, and they knew they had to act fast to save him. The pain was unbearable for Jonathan, and his body was exhausted from the struggle, but he was still alive. The doctors immediately took Jonathan to the hospital, where they worked quickly to stabilize him. After a thorough examination, it was clear that the damage to his calf was too severe to be repaired. To save his life, the doctors had no choice but to amputate part of his leg. Jonathan was unconscious by the time the procedure was completed, and his body began the long process of healing. The attack left Jonathan with both physical and emotional scars. His leg was gone, but his survival was a miracle. His journey to recovery would be long and difficult, but he was alive. He would need months of rehabilitation to adjust to his new reality, and his life would never be the same. The shark attack sparked a renewed conversation about safety in shark-prone waters. Local authorities began urging swimmers and divers to be more cautious and to avoid areas where sharks were known to be more active. This led to increased monitoring of shark populations to understand the risks in popular regions better. Though Jonathan's journey had been terrifying, his survival was a testament to his quick thinking and the help of the fishermen who had reached him in time. His courage in the face of such danger was inspiring to many, and his story would stay with those who had been there to help him and the community that had supported him through his recovery. On December 2, 2022, 39-year-old Laura Edwards set out for a peaceful day of kayaking off the coast of New Zealand. Laura, an experienced kayaker, had spent many years enjoying the outdoors. and the waters off the coast of New Zealand were some of her favorite places. She loved the clear, cool water and the stunning views of the reefs, where she often spent time exploring and soaking in the beauty of the ocean. For Laura, kayaking was not just a hobby. It was a way to feel connected to nature and escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The weather was perfect that day: calm seas, a gentle breeze, and a clear sky. Laura paddled her kayak out near a reef she had visited many times before. The water was unusually calm, and she felt at peace as she glided across the surface. She paused momentarily, admiring the colorful fish swimming beneath the clear water as the sun reflected off the surface. It was the kind of day she had dreamed of: quiet, serene, and full of the simple joys of being on the water. But unbeknownst to Laura, a predator was lurking beneath the surface. As she paddled further into the water, a shark, likely a great white or a bull shark, silently swam beneath her kayak, waiting for the right moment. Laura had no idea that the shark was there, and her focus was on the beauty around her. The thought of danger never crossed her mind as she enjoyed her peaceful kayaking. Then, without warning, the shark rammed into her kayak with incredible force. The impact jolted Laura, causing her to lose her balance and fall into the water. The kayak flipped, and for a split second Laura was submerged, her heart racing as she struggled to regain control. As she came up for air, she realized the situation was far worse than she had imagined. The shark had not retreated. It was still circling her, waiting to strike again. Panicked, Laura swam frantically toward her kayak, hoping to climb back onto it and escape. But the shark, circling just below the surface, was not giving her any chance to escape. Laura's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to defend herself. Her heart pounded in her chest as she felt the cold water around her and the shark's presence just beneath her. She grabbed the kayak's paddle, holding it out in front of her, hoping it would be enough to keep the predator at bay. The shark struck again, its sharp teeth sinking into Laura's side. The pain was excruciating, and she screamed out, but the sound was lost in the vastness of the ocean. Despite the pain and the fear that surged through her, she fought back, pushing the paddle at the shark to keep it away. Her movements were sluggish now, exhaustion setting in as the shock of the attack wore her down. The blood from her side mixed with the salt water, and she could feel the strength draining from her body. In a desperate move, Laura finally reached the boat she had been paddling toward. A passing tourist group saw her struggle and rushed to rescue her. They pulled her aboard, but the attack had left Laura badly wounded. She was bleeding heavily, but she was still alive. As the boat moved away from the danger zone, Laura collapsed, barely conscious but grateful to be alive. As Laura was pulled aboard the boat, her body was covered in blood. The sharp pain in her side was intense, and she could feel her strength fading. Her breathing was shallow, and she was barely conscious as the boat moved away from the area where the shark had attacked. The tourist group who had rescued her worked quickly to stabilize her, but they could see how serious her injuries were. Laura was still alive, but it was clear that she needed immediate medical attention. The boat sped toward the nearest port, and during the ride, Laura felt herself slipping in and out of consciousness. The shock from the attack and the loss of blood were overwhelming, and her mind became hazy. She could hear the voices of the tourists, but they sounded distant. The world around her seemed to blur as she tried to focus on staying awake. She was aware of the pain in her side, and every movement felt like a struggle, but she knew she had to stay alert. When the boat finally reached the shore, emergency responders were waiting. They rushed to her side, quickly assessing her condition. Laura's wounds were severe. The shark's bite had caused deep gashes in her side, and the blood loss was critical. The medical team worked quickly, applying pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding and preparing her for transport to the hospital. Laura could feel their hands on her, but everything around her seemed distant as she was placed onto a stretcher. At the hospital, the doctors immediately took over. They could see how much damage the shark's bite had caused. The deep wounds on her side were dangerous, and they needed to act fast to prevent further complications. The medical team worked tirelessly to clean and dress the wounds, using advanced techniques to close the deep cuts and stop the bleeding. Despite their best efforts, the doctors were concerned about the risk of infection and the long recovery process Laura would face. Laura remained unconscious for several hours, her body struggling to heal. When she finally woke up, she was in a hospital bed surrounded by medical staff. Her side was wrapped in bandages and she felt weak, but she was grateful to be alive. She could still feel the sting of the shark's bite, but the relief of surviving the attack was powerful. The doctors told her that the attack had been severe, but they were hopeful that with time and treatment, she would recover. The aftermath of the attack was not only physical, but emotional. Laura knew that she would carry the scars of this attack with her for the rest of her life, both on her body and in her mind. The experience had been terrifying and it left her shaken, but she was determined to heal and continue living her life. The shark attack increased awareness about the presence of sharks in the area. Local authorities warned others about the risks of swimming and kayaking in shark-prone waters. Discussions were held about improving safety measures, including better monitoring of shark activity near popular tourist areas. The attack also sparked more research into shark behavior and measures that could be taken to avoid future attacks. Laura's survival was a reminder of the unpredictable dangers that can arise in the ocean. Though her life had been changed forever, she was thankful for the quick actions of the tourist group who had saved her life. She knew that with time she would heal and find a way to move forward. But the memory of that terrifying day would stay with her forever.